Ndebele stitch. This can be done in single or multiple strands. Strands make a herringbone pattern, which is why it's often called the herringbone stitch. First I'll demonstrate the single strand herringbone. We take about an arm's length of thread and we pick up 4 beads. I'm using size 8 seed beads. We slide the beads down to the end of the tail, leaving about 6 inches. We sew back up through the first 2 beads, going in the same end our tail is coming out of, our thread making a loop. We then sew down through the next 2 beads, and then back up through the first 2 beads. We pick up 2 beads. Our thread is coming out of the first bead in the last row, so we sew back down through the second bead in the last row. We want to bring our thread up to the top of our work. Our thread is coming out of the bottom of this bead, so we come across to the bead next to it and sew up through this and the bead above it. And our thread is back at the top of our work. We pick up 2 beads. Our thread is coming out the top of this bead. We sew down through the bead next to it. Again, we want to bring our yarn up by moving across from the last bead and up through the next 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads. We're coming out of this bead, sew down through the bead next to it. Then move across and sew back up through the next 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads, down through 1 bead, then back up through 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads, down through 1 bead, then back up through 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads, down through 1 bead, up through 2 beads. Pick up 2, down through 1, and up through 2. Carry on in that manner until you have your desired lengths. That's a single strand Ndebele stitch. Let's take a look at the multi-strand Ndebele stitch. Again, I'm using size 8 seed beads. I also have size 15 seed beads. We thread our needle with an arm span of thread. We're going to make a foundation row of ladder stitch. We pick up 4 beads. We slide them down to our tail and sew back up through the first 2 beads and back down through the next 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads. Our tail is coming out of the bottom, so you sew back down through the top of these 2 beads and back up through the beads we've just added. 2 beads. We're coming up the top, so we sew up through the bottom and back down through the 2 new beads. Pick up 2 beads, down through the last 2 beads and back up through the beads we've just added. Pick up 2, up through 2 and down through 2. Keep going until you reach your desired length, making sure you have an even number of units. I've made 6 units. Pick up 2 beads. We're coming out of the top of these first 2 beads, so we sew down through the next 2 beads. Sew up through the next 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads, down through the next 2 beads, up through the next 2, pick up 2, and down through the last 2 beads. And our first row of herringbone is complete. We now need to move our thread up to this bead to start our next row. Our thread is coming out of the bottom of the last bead. We sew up through the bead next to it. We then move back across to the beads on the end, sewing up through the top 2 beads. We're now in position to start our next row. Pick up 2 beads. We're coming out of this bead on the end. We sew down through the bead next to it. We then sew up through the next bead along. Pick up 2 beads. We're coming up through this bead. We sew down through the next bead. sew up through the next bead, pick up 2 beads, sew down through the last bead. Now I will demonstrate another method of bringing our yarn up to the top bead on the end. Pick up 3 size 15 seed beads. Our thread is coming out the bottom of this bead. We skip over this bead and sew up through the top bead on the end. This gives us a decorative edge to our work as well as repositioning our thread. Let's begin our next row. Pick up 2 beads. We're coming out the top of this bead. We sew down through the next bead and up through the next bead. Pick up 2 beads, down through the next bead and up through the next bead. Pick up 2 beads. We then sew down through these 2 beads. I'll demonstrate our first method of turning to get our thread back into position. We're coming out of the bottom of the 3rd bead down. We come up through the bead next to it. We bring our thread back across to the beads on the end and sew up through the top 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads, down through a bead, up through a bead. Pick up 2 beads, down through 1, up through 1. Pick up 2 and down through 1. Back to our second method of turning our thread. We pick up 3 size 15 seed beads. We skip the 2nd bead down and sew back up through the top bead. Pick up 2 beads, down through 1, up through 1. Pick up 2, down through 1, up through 1. Pick up 2 and down through 2. Back to our first method of turning. We're coming out of the bottom of the 3rd bead down at the end. We sew up through the bead next to it. We then come back across and sew up through the top 2 beads. Pick up 2 beads. We come down through 1, up through 1. Pick up 2, down through 1, up through 1. Pick up 2 and down through the last bead. Back to our second method of turning. We pick up 3 size 15 beads. We skip the bead we're coming out of and sew back up through the top bead. Keep going until you reach your desired length. You can use either method of turning your thread. The first method tends to straighten the beads out a little, but the second, more decorative method holds the shape better. Keep that in mind when you're choosing which method you want to use. Let's finish our work by giving it a neat border. Pick up 4 beads. We're coming out of the top bead at the end. We sew down through the bead next to it. We come back across and sew back up through these top 3 beads. We sew down through these 2 beads and back up through the first 2 beads. We come down through these 3 beads, sew up through the bead next to it. Pick up 2. We sew down through these 2 and back up through the 2 we just added. Pick up 2, come down through the next bead, up through the next bead, pick up 2, down through 2, and back up through the 2 we just added. Pick up 2, down through the last one, up through 3, and down through 2, and back up through these 2. And that's how you do the Ndebele or herringbone stitch.